Hello, Mr. Jitters here. This video came about after we found a letter written by someone we'll call James Carter. That's not his real name. It's a fictional one, chosen to protect his identity and his family. What makes this letter so compelling? It was written from inside a jail cell. This is his story. As I write to you, I can feel the air in this cell thick with despair, a cold gray tomb closing in from all sides. I sit on the edge of a rusted metal cot, my fingers trembling as they clutch a faded photograph of my son, Ethan. His bright blue eyes pierce through the creases, his smile a cruel reminder of a life stolen from me. Across from me, the guard sits rigidly, his face an unmoving mask of indifference, though his eyes flicker with a trace of curiosity. He has brought my last meal, overcooked steak, lumpy mashed potatoes, and a slice of pie already congealing. It remains untouched on the tray. I can't stomach it, not tonight. Not with the clock ticking ever closer to my end. In a few hours, they'll strap me to a table and still my heart forever. But before that needle slides into my vein, I must unburden my soul. I need someone to hear the truth, the whole, twisted, terrifying truth. It began in Centralia, Pennsylvania, a town forsaken by God and man. Beneath its cracked streets, an underground coal fire raged, a hellmouth exhaling sulfur and ash into the air. The ground smoked and hissed, glowing faintly red in places where the earth split open like festering wounds. Most had fled years ago, leaving behind rotting houses and skeletal trees, but I stayed. After the divorce, I had nothing left. Nothing but Ethan, my 8-year-old boy, who came to me every other weekend. His laughter was the only light in that desolate place, cutting through the gloom like a beacon. That weekend, the last I'd ever hold him, we were playing hide and seek in the blackened woods behind my crumbling house. The trees loomed like twisted sentinels, their gnarled branches clawing at a sky choked with gray clouds. The air reeked of sulfur, a stench that burned my throat as I counted to 10, my voice echoing into the stillness. Ready or not, here I come, I called, turning with a grin. But he was gone. No rustle of leaves, no giggle, no sign of him. Just silence, heavy and suffocating. Ethan, I shouted, my voice cracking. The wind answered with a low moan, carrying the distant crackle of the burning earth. I searched the woods, tearing through brambles that clawed at my skin, my boots sinking into soil that felt unnaturally warm. Hours bled into days, then weeks. The police scoured the area, their flashlights slicing through the fog, while the few remaining townsfolk whispered about curses and the fires below. But there was nothing, no footprint, no scrap of his red jacket, no trace. It was as if the ground had swallowed him whole. My ex-wife, Sarah, turned feral with grief. "You let him disappear," she screamed, her nails raking my arm. "You're no father," her words carved into me deeper than any blade. 2 years later, she broke. I found her in her apartment, dangling from a rope tied to the ceiling fan, her face bloated and blue. Ethan's old toys were scattered across the floor, a silent accusation. Her suicide note was a single line scribbled in black ink. I can't live without him. I wanted to follow her into the void, to let the pain consume me. But I couldn't. Not until I found him. I sold everything, my house, my car, even the tarnished wedding band Sarah had once slipped onto my finger, and poured every cent into the search. I chased whispers across continents, from abandoned mines in Kentucky to desolate villages in Eastern Europe. Each lead a dead end that left me emptier than before. Then came the murmured name in a smoky Madrid bar, spoken by a man who wouldn't meet my eyes. A child, he said, blue-eyed, quiet, living in a village no one ever visited, nestled in the arms of the mountains. I left before dawn, driving through winding roads that shrank into dirt paths, past olive groves and shuttered houses that watched me like silent sentries. The town was little more than a cluster of sun-baked buildings, the air thick with the scent of dust and citrus. No signs, no tourists, just wary glances from old men hunched in doorways. But there was a church. Every town, no matter how forgotten, had a church. Its stone walls were crumbling under the weight of time, its steeple leaning as if bowing to some unseen force. There, on its cracked steps, sat a boy. Older, taller, his hair darker than I remembered, but those eyes, those piercing blue eyes, were Ethan's. He was tossing a stick to a mangy stray dog, oblivious to the world. My heart lurched into my throat. "Ethan," I rasped, stumbling toward him. He looked up, his gaze empty, unseeing, like a stranger wearing my son's face. No recognition, no spark, just a void. Then I saw him, a figure lurking in the shadowed archway of the church, watching us. Tall and gaunt, his face was a map of cruelty, pale skin stretched tight over sharp bones, a jagged scar slicing from his eyebrow to his jaw. His eyes glinted like polished steel, cold and predatory. He tilted his head, studying me, and a shiver crawled down my spine. I knew in that instant that he was the one who'd taken my son. Rage ignited in my chest, a wildfire I couldn't control. I followed him as he slipped into an alley, his long coat trailing behind him like a shroud. The cobblestones were slick with something dark, oil or blood, I couldn't tell. The air grew heavy, thick with a metallic tang that coated my tongue. He stopped and turned, his scarred lips curling into a smirk. "You're too late," he said, his voice a guttural rasp, accented and broken. "He's mine now, body and soul." I lunged at him, my hands finding his throat. We crashed to the ground, his nails digging into my wrists, his breath hot and rancid against my face. He laughed, a wet, choking sound. As we grappled, his strength unnatural, his bony fingers clawing at my eyes. But I was fueled by years of torment, and I squeezed harder, feeling his windpipe buckle beneath my grip. His laughter turned to gurgles, then silence. When his body went limp, I staggered back, panting, my hands slick with sweat and something darker. I looked up, and there was Ethan, standing at the mouth of the alley. His silhouette was framed by the dim streetlight, but his face, his face, was wrong. His eyes were black pits, bottomless and hollow, and his mouth stretched into a faint, unnatural grin. He didn't speak, didn't move. He just watched me, a specter of the boy I'd lost. I killed for him, and yet he looked at me like I was the monster. Panic seized me. I grabbed his arm, his skin ice cold, and ran, dragging him through the village as shadows seemed to twist and writhe in the corners of my vision. The townsfolk stared, their faces pale and expressionless, as if they knew something I didn't. At the border, the police were waiting, their sirens a banshee's wail in the night. They tore Ethan from my grasp, his vacant stare burning into me as they dragged him away. I screamed his name until my voice gave out, but he never looked back. Now here I am in this cell, the photograph trembling in my blood-stained hands. Tears blur Ethan's face as I whisper, "I just wanted to save you. I just wanted my boy back." The guard shifts, clearing his throat. "It's time," he says, his voice low, almost reluctant. "These will be my last words. If anyone reads this, if anyone still cares, please, don't let my story die with me. Someone out there knows the truth. Maybe someone will find Ethan. Maybe he will find this letter or some version of it. I don't know if he's still my son or if I lost him long ago to something I can't understand. But if you're reading this, and if there's even the faintest chance, please don't stop looking." The guard is standing now. He doesn't have to speak. I know it's time. I hope there's a heaven, because I've already lived through hell.